We're live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third stakeholder meeting for the investigation of electricity wheeling, docket number 2024-200 or 0200. My name is Andrew Okabe. I'm one of the utility analysts with the Commission working on this docket. I will be facilitating some of the discussion for today, as well as this introduction. Someone on the call that's giving reverb.
The mute me. The mute.
Someone has to mute if you're in person. Okay. Is it good? Okay, great. So again, thank you everyone for taking the time today to attend this third stakeholder meeting. The Commission has invited stakeholders to provide feedback throughout this investigatory proceeding into electricity billing. We issued a proposed work plan on January 31st, 2025 via the Commission's case and docket management system, the CDMS, including draft definitions, a draft statement of issues, and a procedural schedule of upcoming stakeholder meetings to further refine this investigation. The Commission staff is reviewing comments provided by the stakeholders and have updated some of the materials you have seen today. Let's go over some housekeeping items first. Before we begin, again, housekeeping items, please note that today's meeting is being recorded and will be posted online to the Commission's YouTube at a later date. As with other meetings hosted by the Commission, we ask that each participant be respectful of each other's time when speaking and all of the perspective perspectives shared today. As this is a hybrid meeting, here are some guidance for those who are joining us remotely. Please mute yourselves if you are not presenting or speaking. Please raise your hand using the raise hand feature on Teams. Alternatively, you may physically raise your hand on screen if you have your camera on. Please lower your hand when you're done speaking. You can also leverage the chat feature on Teams to ask questions or submit comments. Commission staff is monitoring the chat and will elevate questions and comments when raised. While this meeting is open to the public for viewing, in the interest of time and to ensure that the Commission's agenda is fully addressed, the Commission asks that if members of the public wish to ask questions, that their questions be submitted as public comments filed in the Commission's case and document management system, CDMS. Last thing, for those attending in person, the restrooms are located in the basement, one floor down. The codes for the restrooms are posted on the whiteboard you see in the front of the room. And now I want to make available opening remarks of Commissioner Yost. Please go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Andrew. Is this hearing this on the recording? Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. As you will hear later in the meeting, close to the end, we will talk a little bit more about how the Commission is about to issue an order to move this proceeding onto a new phase. So this will be the last kind of discussion we have before we start that new phase, and we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, just generally, I want people to understand that we are, because of a lot of things that are going on in the world and in our state, we are going to make an effort to accelerate the pace of progress in this proceeding and not spend as much time in general discussion, but really try to get more into the specifics of things that people may actually be able to agree to, that ideally will work for everyone. And we are going to be looking for some, out of the box thinking, creative solutions, and then trying to establish as quickly as we can some basic kind of ideas, templates for what some prospective projects might actually look like in terms of the type of site that might be prioritized in terms of size, location, characteristics, how we can create some kind of initial review, very high level review process for HECO and government agencies to communicate with each other about the feasibility of sites. And I know in HECO's presentation today, you've layered on to some of your maps some sites of government land and so forth, and you'll have some information about that, which is great. But we don't have anybody, I don't think we even have anybody online from any of the major government agencies, do we? And I'm not saying that Hawaii State Energy Office is not a major government agency, but you don't control land and resources to build projects. So that's what we really need to get the agencies, whether it's from the counties or from the state, engaged and interested in this to see it worth their time, right? So full disclosure, I mean, I've had some additional discussions with the Department of Environmental Services at the county. They've given me information as to potential prospective sites for utility scale PV plus battery development. I want to come up with a way to share those that information with HECO and to get a conversation going so that perhaps they can become a template that, you know, we look at what's actually involved in looking at some of these sites, what kind of ROI is necessary for the government to realistically want to leap into this and do something about it, and what's the scale that has to be achieved for this to be worth anybody's while. And then if there are ancillary benefits that we can achieve through resilience hub construction, you know, in communities, or they're just geographically beneficial if they have islanding capability or black start capability, like that's the kind of detail that it would be great to get to sooner rather than later. And then if we can show that sort of model to Department of Transportation, Department of Health, Department of Education, you know, departments that have land and control and the capacity to potentially be involved in large scale development, like we need to give them more specifics is sort of my sense of it. And then I'm happy to be, you know, a cheerleader and advocate for a model that people start to want to promote, so that we can actually see if we can get some of these resources coming onto our grid, because there are so many challenges with private development right now, as we all know. So anyway, that's my little soapbox for this, for just setting the framework for what's coming next. And I think we want to go on now to current status on legislation. Andrew?
Yes, really quickly though, I want to go through the rest of the introductions. Thank you, Commissioner Yost. Before we dive in the agenda, let's go through a brief round of introductions, but I'll be calling out the organizations, and I do request only one representative from that organization to basically state the number of people or the people from the organization here today, either on the call or in person, and that's fine. That way we can be more orderly than we were for the first meeting. And I apologize for the first meeting. That was my fault for making that call. But anyways, I'll start with the commission staff. Again, or commissioners commission staff. We have both Commissioner Kwai and Commissioner Yost. Commissioner Kwai on the call, Commissioner Yost in person. We have Kelly Earls, our assigned attorney for this case. Anand Samtani, our one of the supervising attorneys. I believe supervising economist. I'm so sorry. We have Alan back here. He's our engineer. Abby Raup, one of our other economists. Sorry, I almost said attorney. We have our chief auditor online, Carolyn Laborte. We have another attorney online, the supervising attorney online, Mike Wallerstein. We have another auditor online, Jackie Young. We have one of our communication officer online, Deborah Kwan. Let's see. And we have one more from the commission, Charissa Cole. She's one of our neighbor island reps. Let's go off with the CA next. Anyone from the CA want to introduce everyone from the CA really quickly? Kaylu, do you want to do it? Or Marcy, sorry.
Sorry, I'm
Go
not
ahead.
sure if Mickey Knox is in the room. Sorry, our office has been really busy, but he was saying he might attend. He's our acting supervising attorney if he's there. Marcy Chang, chief engineer, Kaylu Zhang, with the engineering branch. And I think that's all we have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's also go to the State Energy Office. Oh, that's not on. That's not on. Yeah. Sorry, just flip the switch up.
Yeah.
It should be working.
Hello. Okay. I'm Carissa, the regulatory assistant with the State Energy Office, and I think it should just be me today.
Okay, let's go to anyone from DLNR on the call or in person. Anyone from DOE on the call or in person? Anyone from DOH on the call or in person? Anyone from any of the counties on the call or in person? Anyone from DOT on the call or in person? I think I called DLNR already, right? Okay, let's go to the private companies or community groups. Let's start with HECO first, though. Final lecture first.
Oops.
Yep.
Hi, Ken Aramaki. I'm the Director of T&D and Interconnection Planning at Hawaiian Electric. With us is Peter Young, Director of Pricing, Rich Franjunen from Regulatory Affairs, Brendan Bailey, our Vice President of Customer Service, James Abraham, Associate or Legal, Legal, Yo Kawanami, Director of Customer Energy Resources, and I'm not sure who's online. Several folks online from probably various areas.
That's fine. Anyone else here on the call or here in person that wants to introduce themselves on behalf of the organization?
Kylie Wager Cruz and Harley Broyles from Earth Justice.
Good afternoon, Doug Kodaga, outside counsel for Ulupono Initiative.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to ask for folks online, do you mind just putting your name and organization in the chat? That'll be helpful for us. Thanks.
Okay, while you're doing that, I have the agenda slide up. Let's go over the agenda slide for today. We'll first go over a quick review of SB 589 as it currently stands, as Commissioner Yost has already introduced. We will review the basics of interconnection as Commission staff sees it. We will go over the presentation by Hawaiian Electric on specifics of interconnection as they also see it. We will review the models of arrangement and the REZ concepts. We will discuss design of electricity wheeling and intergovernmental electricity wheeling requirements for interconnection, limitation considerations such as size, scope, and where generation is needed, as framed by Commissioner Yost as well. And we will go over upcoming stakeholder meetings and topics and go over next steps and close. Okay. So SB 589 SD1 HD3 does have a working definition inside of that proposed legislation or proposed measure or proposed bill. For the purposes of the section, intergovernmental wheeling means retail wheeling where the buyer and seller are agencies, or departments of the state or any county government, and retail wheeling means the transmission of electric power from a storage or energy generation system through the utility meter for consumption by a separate utility account holder. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, or other feedback regarding this working definition?
Andrew, I'd like to actually weigh in and just skip this issue. We parties have already briefed, their own views on definitions. That's going to be part of our upcoming order, is what we think about what everyone else said. If this legislation passes, that will influence things, but if it doesn't, then it won't. So
okay, I apologize for.
That's okay.
Some kind of background on SB 589 SD1 HD3 is currently in conference. It may change with a CD1. If it gets past this session, we're going to skip any discussion on this matter. Okay, let's go over the basics of interconnection. Notably, there is hosting capacity that Hawaiian Electric will or has provided with their locational value maps. Wheeling will enable projects can interconnect either at the subtransmission or the distribution levels. Interconnection usually requires an interconnection requirement study. And solar or the renewable resource may be interconnected behind the meter or direct connected to the grid in front of the meter. Does anyone have any particular questions, concerns, or other feedback regarding this basic interconnection information that we have provided before we get into Hawaiian Electric's presentation? Okay, let's continue on to Hawaiian Electric's presentation. Let me bring it up. The screen. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Ken Aramaki, again, Director of T&D and Interconnection Planning. Co-presenting with me is Peter Young, Director of Pricing. Next slide, please. So for the agenda, the Commission requested information on several of these topics, so that's what this briefing is about. I'll go over the hosting capacity analysis, steps to achieve interconnection, renewable energy zones, and then Peter will cover considerations on next steps. Next slide, please. And next slide. Okay, so introduction to hosting capacity. So typically when we talk about hosting capacity, it's talking about distribution hosting capacity. And distribution hosting capacity is the amount of small-scale DER that can be added to the distribution system before control changes or system upgrades are required to safely and reliably integrate additional DER. And for DER, in the context of what we're talking about, and particularly in Hawaii, DER is often referred to for customer-sited resources like rooftop solar plus battery. Just when you talk to mainline utilities, DERs, they talk about like distribution connected resources. Distribution hosting capacity reviews the thermal or voltage violations due to the amount of additions of DERs. It's part of our initial technical review process under Rule 14H, and it's used as kind of like a screening tool to see if certain projects can kind of pass through. It's also important to note that hosting capacity is also dynamic, so it's not like a constant number. It's developed using models which take into account various factors. And so as the grid changes, as equipment on the system changes, as more DERs are added, as load changes, all those things can impact the available hosting capacity on a distribution circuit. And yeah, so if an upgrade occurs, like reconductoring of a distribution circuit, that can provide additional hosting capacity for that particular circuit. One more thing, the graphic on the right is the locational value map that Andrew also had a link to. So that shows various levels of hosting capacity based on circuits. Okay, next slide. So how do we kind of do hosting capacity? This is how we develop a hosting capacity number for a particular circuit. So it starts with a forecast. So you take the DERs that are already on a particular circuit. You take the pending DERs, so potential DERs that will come into the circuit, and then you layer on another forecast that can potentially be added to the circuit. So all that is the anticipated DER on a particular circuit. That is then modeled in what we use Synergy. That's a modeling software. And so that is used to identify whether there's thermal violations or voltage violations. So it can kind of see where the boundary of how much DER you can add is. If the forecasted DER amount, if there's like a violation that occurs through the modeling process, then we'll know that at some point an upgrade will be required. So in our integrated grid plan, we've also done a hosting capacity analysis of our system and found certain upgrades in certain areas are required to meet like a 5-year forecasted demand, 5-year forecasted DR growth.
Can I ask a couple of quick questions
Sure.
on this slide? So are you still assuming that whatever the DER resource is committing its nameplate capacity, 100% of its nameplate capacity, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year? Is that part of your hosting capacity analysis at this time, or is that an antiquated way of doing it?
Yeah, no. Through the modeling, they use like a profile or like a more accurate profile, I guess. It's not like assuming a PV is on 24/7.
Okay.
And I don't know the specific answer to your question of using nameplate rating or the like a capacity factor. I'm pretty sure it's a capacity factor, but also there is like a static and probabilistic way. So they multiple runs. So if a circuit's nearing its hosting capacity, we can also run a probabilistic model to see where that boundary is. So it kind of addresses several of those things.
Okay. And then if a system has batteries associated with it, and let's say is also obligated to dispatch power to the grid under a scheduled dispatch program, or so, is that information included in your modeling of hosting capacity when a new resource is presented and considered?
I'm pretty sure it would be, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So just, you can't hear Yo, but Yo said yes, basically. So then what happens also when legacy systems have batteries added to them? I know that a long time ago, right, legacy systems were assumed, to contribute 100% of their nameplate capacity 24/7, 365 as a means of like the most conservative modeling of hosting capacity. So a lot of those inputs happened a long time ago. Is there any updating that occurs to your overall hosting capacity analysis when legacy systems are converted to new inverters that have greater ride through or whatever capabilities, or voltage control, or new batteries that control the timing of the output? Like, is that getting updated or refreshed somehow in your hosting and capacity analysis?
We might have to get back to you to make sure that we're 100% accurate, but I would think that it is, because as new systems are added, there's basically, depending on what type of system it is, there's different curves that are used for the analysis. So, my guess is that a legacy system changing over to a PV plus battery system would have a different profile than a PV system. But maybe that's something we can get back to you on.
Okay. And I guess also related to that, like whether HECO's ever done any forecasting for, let's say there's a very saturated circuit, right? And if you ran a perspective or hypothetical model where, let's say 50% of the legacy systems on this circuit converted to a grid services program that controlled the dispatch of the power, the exporting of the power, what would the hosting capacity be in that situation? Have you guys ever done modeling like that, or forecasting of what the circuit might look like?
We have not.
Okay.
Not under those scenarios.
All right. And then last question is, this only applies to systems of what size and below? Is it 250 kW and below, or 500 kW and below, or what's the?
This is generally for 100 kW and below.
100 kW and
Yeah.
below. Okay.
Small.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And if things are connected to the transmission network directly, then there's no hosting capacity analysis at all. There's a different analysis that you do as to whether or not that's manageable for a variety of other reasons. Correct?
Yeah, you're actually getting into the next slide.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, I'll stop there then. Thank you.
Okay, so so this next slide is talking about. So I talked about distribution hosting capacity, which is usually what we refer to when we talk about hosting capacity. But there are other limits or hosting capacity like limits on different parts of the system. So the bottom is the distribution. So that's what I described earlier. And then above that, we have subtransmission and transmission. Resources added at those levels. The difference in that analysis is subtransmission and transmission connected resources are connected at points on the system instead of broadly distributed like DERs on the system. So for those, an analysis that could be done is called an injection analysis, which is looking at points along, like pretty much every single circuit, every single subtransmission or transmission circuit, to figure out where the capacity limitations are if you're going to add a certain system to that level. And then above that, there's some analysis is done on the system level where we have to make sure that the resources that are added to the system can be managed together and can provide balancing. The other thing is wherever the system is added, wherever the new resource is added, so for example, at the subtransmission level, that because power flow goes upwards in this diagram, it does also impact the ability for the higher levels to host resources as well. Does that answer your question? Okay, thanks. Next slide. Okay. So steps to achieve interconnection. So going left to right on the table. Sorry, I know there's a lot going on in this table. So basically the flow of how the system is, I guess the infrastructure of the system is where there's a generator that's around 13.8. These are kind of general numbers, by the way. So 13.8 kV. Then it's stepped up to transmission, subtransmission level. That's so for Oahu, it's 138 kV or 46 kV. Maui and Hawaii is 69 kV and or 34.5 kV. That subtransmission is also stepped down in distribution substations. So for Oahu, that's converting 46 kV to 12 kV. And on Maui and Hawaii Island, and sorry, that's kind of a typo. It's either 69, 34 kV or 12 kV. Neighbor islands have substations that convert from 69 or 34.5 to 12 kV. And then it goes to what we call primary distribution, so 12 kV generally. There's multiple voltages. Those primary distribution lines is what kind of runs through major streets, I guess, and thoroughfares that are then converted down to customer level voltages, 120 volts to 480 volts. Okay, so that explains the top. So now we have existing sort of templates or paths to interconnection. And so for like basically CBRE, the CBRE program covered the entire gamut of the system. So it can provide a template for use in this program. So for CBRE large project, which also mirrors the utility scale renewable dispatchable RFP process and requirements. Those are generally for greater than 5 megawatt on Oahu and greater than 2.5 megawatt on Maui and Hawaii Island. And both pretty much cover between the subtransmission level and transmission level interconnected projects. And then you have CBRE mid-tier, which covers like primary distribution level projects, so around the 12 kV level. And that's for 250 kW to 5 megawatts for Oahu and 250 kW to 2.5 megawatts for Maui and Hawaii Island. And then at the smaller scale, there's CBRE small and also the newly created Smart Renewable Energy Program. So that covers like the customer level, maybe a little higher interconnections. So showing 4 kW to 250 kW. Smart Renewable Energy Program doesn't technically have a kW cap, but is generally made for residential or commercial customers. And then now the bottom part is And IRS is generally required for between like that 250 kW and up range. And IRS and IRS varies based on complexity, and the complexity is dependent on the size essentially, or the potential impact of the system, which is sort of correlated with size. So yeah, so next slide, please. Okay, so this is, and I'm not going to go through the entire flowchart because this is available on our website, but the next two slides are basically going to show kind of the difference between a smaller scale project and a larger scale project. So for this first one, it's the Smart Renewable Energy Program, again, made more for commercial and residential customers. It's covered under Rule 14H. And under Rule 14H, projects greater than 250 kW may require SCADA. So on Oahu, 1 megawatt and up do require SCADA. Between 1 megawatt and 250 kW, it may require SCADA depending on the situation. And then for neighbor islands, 250 kW and above requires SCADA. And SCADA is monitoring and control of the facility. And then projects that are 100 kW or lower will go through the simplified review. The flow chart, while there's sort of many blocks, there's a lot that happens in parallel. So left to right is basically submitting the application, getting all that together. And then we do a review process, which is all in parallel and usually it should be quick. Barring any like major issues or challenges. And then there's like a validation and installation phase, and then it's sort of placed in service. So this is a sort of example of a smaller interconnection. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now this one I'm definitely not going to go through, but this is also available on the website, and that has a link. But this is what a utility scale resource, like the steps that it would have to go through to get to commercial operation. There's kind of a lot of steps, and because it's a large scale project, there's a lot of things that we need to make sure that like site control and all that stuff need to be all done kind of upfront. Of course, an interconnection requirement study would need to be done. Yeah, okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so renewable energy zones. So renewable energy zones is basically we've done a study to see, okay, how much renewable energy can potentially be added to in certain areas, and then what are the requirements, what are the transmission level requirements needed to connect that much megawatts to the system in those general areas. So yeah, so renewable energy zones, just to be clear, they do cost money to build system upgrades, but this is a way to more efficiently develop transmission to certain areas that will, maybe have multiple developments that are clustered together to have a large amount of renewable energy added to the system. We worked with NREL to develop like kind of solar potentials on the island to figure out how much megawatts is the potential in those areas, and then looked at what the closest transmission point would be and figured out what kind of the general upgrades are. But this is, again, just a study. So where the rubber meets the road is when we actually get potential developments that, would be co-located. We could do basically an injection analysis to figure out what the capacity is at that point, and or what the upgrades are to add that much megawatts to the system. We've attempted to do RFIs, request for information, to try to get developers to tell us where they potentially have projects that they're being looked at, so that we can, maybe look at ways to do res planning. We still welcome additional input from state and county agencies. I know they're not on today, but yeah, reiterating that that welcome. And then yeah, objective is to proactively plan and build transmission. This intergovernmental wheeling is a good way to support the development of these reses and aligns with, obviously commission's inclinations and the governor's EO. Okay, next slide, please. This is just to show, like, these are maps that were created in the initial res study to show what the potential capacity is in these different areas. So, I mean, again, this is just like a study, and in the study, we've figured out, what the general transmission requirements are to add those numbers to the system, but it's really going to depend on what is going to be added to the system, and that will be needed to be more refined. Okay, and next slide is Hawaii Island. Yeah, so same thing. I mean, so if you look at the top numbers, we were trying to figure out how to add, on the left side was 720 megawatts to the system, and on the right side was 830 megawatts, of course, spread out. Okay, next slide. This is a map that shows state-owned lands in green, as well as federal-owned lands in like a peach. But there are lands that do overlap with these zones, and if there's a way, I think like Commissioner Yost was talking about, having more discussion with different agencies, finding out where they could actually cite things. I mean, we could be there and ready to, have discussions about what points in our system are available, and or what the general upgrades would be required to add it to those areas. Okay. Next slide, please. Turn it over to Peter. Oh.
Did you analyze county lands as well for these maps?
It's not on that map. I'm pretty sure that our res map looked at state and county lands and the availability of solar for those lands. But just that for this particular map, we just showed the federal and state.
Can you provide a map that does show county as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
For each island?
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks, Ken. Let's go back to the title slide, Andrew, and let me offer a opening disclaimer, so to speak. So we have Hawaiian Electric. We have some thoughts about how to carry wheeling forward, and we know that we weren't asked specifically in today's agenda to offer those, and they range in the realm of there are other initiatives that are going on with regard to remote generation development, DERs, and our point related to the discussion points we want to offer is wheeling needs to fit within and be distinct and differentiated, or maybe it fits exactly within some of the other initiatives that are already in place or that are currently being developed. CBREs are going to evolve, so we need to land wheeling, within that context. We have some thoughts on what might be good to have and what questions need to be answered from the financial perspective. And that's what I'm going to discuss in the next 5 minutes or so. I know that wasn't on the agenda, and I don't know if we're going to intersect or start to be part of the discussion that you want to offer, Commissioner, but let us go ahead there. Okay. Let's go with this first slide. So there are existing programs where we have remote generation. Certainly CBRE and the hybrid microgrids are among them. And again, the point is that, wheeling, we need to make sure we understand what we want wheeling to be. We need to understand what the existing programs and their evolution are so that we can create meaningful and hopefully distinct opportunities that fit the market appropriately. We are considering proposals for a new CBRE model. We'll show that in a second. On this next slide, let's see the next slide. Sorry, this is the existing CBRE model with which you're familiar. There's a subscriber organization, and there are a lot of flows of payments. There's a separate relationship between the customer subscriber and the subscriber organization. Hawaiian Electric gets to be the financial clearinghouse between the subscriber and the subscriber organization. That's what we have right now in the existing setup. In the next slide, this is an example of what we think CBRE could look like in response to some of the discussion, the PUC inclinations where Hawaiian Electric actually can work directly between a customer and developer, or it could be even simpler if Hawaiian Electric was the builder developer of the renewable generation system. This is something that we're still thinking about, but we wanted to illustrate this for you today. For wheeling, and Andrew, let me step to the next slide. These are concept ideas. Again, as I said, some things that the declarative sentences are some things we think might make sense. And then there's a whole bunch of questions that we believe need to be answered. And let me step through them. If this is to be a tariff program, it should be simple. And I think that's been the Commission's guidance all along. If it is a tariff program, then all transactions need to include the utility. So we believe that would exclude non-utility to non-utility transactions to the extent that the tariff has to govern the wheeling process. I said this or asked this in February. We believe wheeling could work from a remote generation site where there's no local load and all of the energy is sent to the grid. So then we don't confuse this with opportunities that are currently available under our Smart DER programs. As Ken has discussed some of the technical interconnection challenges that relate to sizing. So clearly we need to define a sizing opportunity. Does it need to be absolute? We think that we could grow this in a way that can be managed. Perhaps you could have cumulative participation caps that start at a certain level and change, and during that period as that rollout takes place, participation rules can be tweaked if we see something that makes sense. Again, as Ken has pointed out, advanced identification of potential participants can really help us hone in on what makes sense for a wheeling offer that works. There is a question of development. If this is a remote site, this may be land that a government entity owns, but do they have to develop it themselves, or can they engage a third party? Does the utility have a role in that development as a development participant or a project manager? These are questions I think we need to settle out. Ken has talked about interconnection requirements. We do need to have some rules on dispatch or some clear understanding of how the remote generation is going to work and what conditions it works with the grid. With regard to compensation, how do you assign the benefits? I'm sorry, I said I wouldn't use the word benefits. How do you assign the KWH generation to the wheeling recipients and others? And how do you value that generated energy? And how is it that we can create value or minimize impact to all other customers? Is there an opportunity for everyone to get some sort of benefit from the entire wheeling transaction? With regard to administration, this becomes a real challenge for Hawaiian Electric. We our billing system doesn't adjust as quickly as we would like, and certainly as probably participants in the commission would like. So with regard to a simple tariff, we'd like to find a way to implement something that requires minimal adjustments, both on our IT side and in our billing function side. Certainly we'll be able to contribute and speak to that. One point that we didn't address is, are there, with regard to the government agency participants, are there green attributes of renewables that are valued or need to be considered for that participation, for that participating agency, and how do we address that? Again, these are pieces or questions that we believe need to be answered. Andrew, if you take us to the next slide. What we're thinking is, based on the existing schedule, if we had another conference meeting in June, it would make sense for Hawaiian Electric to actually answer those questions and offer a proposal that we believe makes sense, but offers a structured opportunity for all the participants in this docket to discuss. If that still makes sense, Commissioner Yost and other commissioners and staff. And then also with regard to the CBRE, we're thinking that we'll also submit a new CBRE proposal structure sometime this summer. Appreciate the opportunity to take us beyond today's agenda. Thanks.
That was helpful, Peter. Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate your also willingness to move forward and innovate in CBRE. We're thinking along similar lines, so happy to engage and glad that we're going to do that soon. But we can go ahead with, does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Kylie Wager Cruz, Earth Justice. I'm wondering why the HECO is considering a tariff model as opposed to a payment for use of the wires model. So in other words, instead of just giving bill credits to the benefiting customers of wheeling, why not just set a standard rate for use of the wires and then leave the rest of the financial details up to the developer and the recipient?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part, Kylie. Leave
the rest of the details. It's just setting a rate for use of the wires. That's pure wheeling, and it's its intended form, as I understand it. So I'm wondering why we're considering a tariff model as opposed to a payment model for use of the wires.
Okay, so we think a payment model is still can be achieved within tariff, and I think it actually would need to be established versus tariff. But some of the economic questions are key. Really, we need to understand how the benefits are conveyed. How does the developer basically make his return on investment? Where does that appear? For the customer or the wheeling recipient designee, how do they benefit? And you know, how does that fall to them? And then thirdly, to the extent that there is a wheeling fee that the utility retains for the benefit of the system, how does that align with the costs that are incurred by the rest of the system and all the other customers? We think that all of those financial endpoints need to be governed by tariff so that we can assure equity and balance to all of those parties.
Thanks. I think I was just being imprecise with my language. So I guess the question was more a credit rate versus a fee. And it sounds like you'd use a tariff for both of those, but
yes, and I think we're not stuck or predisposed to any one form. It's really both deliver a type of compensation, and I think that's something that needs to be discussed. So I don't disagree that, yeah, we need to just establish those. We do think it's more effective and fair for all the parties, or at least clearer up front if we establish them via tariff.
Just a quick question. So when I just the way I'm interpreting, you know, the next, I guess, model, right, was kind of like what you're looking at for the wheeling, right? I mean, you have the Seabury version, right, and you have the next one, right? And that one seems like you're just taking away the relationship between the SO and the subscriber, right, and moving it to a HECO, right, taking on that responsibility, right?
Right. That
Yeah.
was a CBRE
Oh, that-
illustration.
Okay.
We could,
But then
after discussion,
Yeah.
decide that's
Yeah.
also appropriate for a wheeling model,
okay.
but we're not saying that.
Okay,
now.
okay. I just wanted to clarify
Yeah,
that. Because
no,
the second
thank
one I
you.
thought was okay. Okay, yeah. Because I mean, the way that's more of a billing type of system. That's more like basically a PPA or a standard form contract system. You know, that the new one, right? Because basically you're directly relating. Has a relationship with the IPP, and you're pushing out the subscriber basically, and you're just gonna dealing with it directly and making sure they get some type of. You're dealing with the subscriber. You're taking on that role.
Yeah, we're taking out the relationship
Yeah.
between the customer subscribers and the
Yeah.
subscriber organization.
Okay.
And that's the part of the transaction that
Right.
that we're not involved in
Right now.
balancing
Yeah.
right now. That's outside of tariff. That's a challenge that we
No.
think
Yeah, because
we'd like to avoid. Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is that when you do that, I mean, I know there was challenges with Seabury in terms of like the billing, in terms of the cost, the online portal. So that sounds like you're gonna take on more work if you do the second one, right? I mean, so that lot of effort into that side. Yeah, I mean, it's just because I remember the online portal took forever, and
Yeah.
it's like there's a lot of issues with it. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges if you want to go that route. So okay, all right. Yeah, because I guess like Patty was saying, because like. The wheeling one is like a charge, right? I mean, is this more of a crediting type of thing you're looking at for wheeling in terms of a tariff system? I mean, versus like a charge for the use of the lines, I guess.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess I wouldn't use either term yet. It's
Okay.
a question of how are the benefits conveyed to those who participate. The folks, particularly the folks who are making the development investment, and the folks who are receiving wheeled energy. How does that change? How are they getting a bill adjustment? We're to go into the details, and we're already
Yeah.
billing them for measured usage on their meter. Quite frankly, the creation of a wheeling generation energy and delivery of that energy into the system
Right.
may not change the wheeling recipient's energy usage or energy usage profile at all. But what will change is they're participating in the transaction now. And then how does that transaction affect their economics? How does that affect their bill? We'll need to establish tariff rules or frameworks to identify how that would work.
Yeah.
That's all we're saying.
Yeah, I just want to see the relationship with the IPP and ECO. That's basically a Sanford contract or a PPA where you already have the interconnection issues resolved through those systems, right? So why would you need wheeling? I guess. I don't know. Just curious. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, we're trying to create something new.
Yeah. I'm just
Right. We're not doing with this. The discussion here is not a PPA relationship. And ideally, whatever. I mean, we're working on some ideas ourselves internally. But when HECO comes back in June, and we've got to look at the procedural schedule we're proposing in the next order, but we do want to keep moving forward quickly. That's great to see something fairly soon from you, because we need to in order to stick to any potential creation of a framework by year end. So just for the intergovernmental side, not for any kind of retail wheeling. But simplicity remains sort of the goal, notwithstanding all of the making of the sausage or what goes into that final calculation. But the number itself needs to be consistent, needs to be easy to understand. It needs to be something that is sufficient to incentivize people to participate. And we have to remember our overarching focus of displacing oil, not just the cost of buying oil, but also our exposure to the volatility of the oil market and the value of that to all ratepayers, right? That's really significant in the Commission's view, and we've got to accelerate away from it. So part of what we may decide, who knows, I mean, just throwing it out there, we may decide we want to focus on intergovernmental wheeling projects of 25 megawatts and above, or something like that. Like we may want to look only initially at things that are of significance to the resource mix, and something that's worth the squeeze, essentially, right? But anyway, that's something to think about and discuss. But there could be different approaches for different sizes, different locations of priority. Any other questions?
Throw in one about the bill credit versus the use of the lines. Just correct me if I'm wrong, Hawaiian Electric. What you're thinking, though, is that they're going to potentially use lands that aren't close to, epicenters of the county. And so how you're envisioning it isn't a rooftop solar directly benefiting that customer. It's much more if they build bigger, far away, that's harder to calculate the use of the line into the epicenter of where it's going to be used. Is that what you're thinking about, why you would do a bill credit versus the charge of the line?
Oh, I don't think we suggested that we have a opinion yet on whether there's a bill credit or the charge of the line, or there may be both. This could be really nuanced, but to the point is that wheeling is a differentiated opportunity because we're suggesting that it should originate from a site where there is no load. We're saying that, if there is some load, the customer could build generation and use that for their own energy needs and export the rest. Our Smart DER program accommodates that now. Without without size limits. So, there could be a smart DER customer who exports little. There could be a smart DER customer who has a larger unit who could export a whole lot. But we're saying a wheeling opportunity could emerge for a customer who has a site but has no load there. So how can that customer, that government customer, create renewable energy, hopefully for the benefit of all, and at least convey some of those energy generation benefits to their specific location elsewhere where they're using energy and perhaps they don't have room to create their own renewable energy at that site. So we think it's a differentiated opportunity that allows for customers to get benefits and more renewable energy can enter the utility system.
I was going to ask you, so no, I guess what I was trying to get to earlier was not necessarily like a PPA or standard for contract, but I was trying to figure out the compensation portion of it. But you guys are kind of figuring that out, right? And then you put that in the plan, I guess, moving forward. Okay, that's fine. That's what I was trying to figure out. I thought, how do you, assign that? It's going to be flat rate. It's going to be how it's going to be designed, lump sum, whatever. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah,
Thanks.
definitely one of those.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, great discussion. 1 second. Okay. So right now I'd like to go over arrangement types. We've seen quite a few different arrangement types over the many years that we've been in regulation, both Hawaiian Electric on their side as well as the commission on our side. I wanted to go over a few. There's a way forward. We think there's a way forward on this. It can be any of these types of arrangement types. Maybe there's other arrangement types that we missed. We're really thinking there might be a hybrid type where we might have a portion of the arrangement type in one type of arrangement versus having something else, maybe a programmatic approach where maybe a compensation piece might be provided elsewhere. The emphasis here is like what Commissioner Yost has brought up. We want to be innovative. We want this to work. We want it to be simple, and we shouldn't be leaving anything on the table, including the type of arrangement. It's just boxing ourselves into just a tariff may not be the right approach. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up as a thought for the stakeholders and Hawaiian Electric, especially going forward, that we need to be kind of turning over every single stone here. And then again, kind of reemphasizing REZs. It's like everyone's favorite word. Okay, so let's quickly go over some of the interconnection requirements and limitations to consider. We know that there are some ideal designs for electricity wheeling and intergovernmental electricity wheeling. We've heard from Hawaiian Electric today that they and in previous presentations and previous discussions that they would prefer a model that would have them export, have an electricity wheeling customer or recipient export without using without serving load from that generation. But we really want to know what other requirements for interconnection appears to be the most difficult to overcome for stakeholders. And unfortunately, not all stakeholders here today. But for those who are here today, which are the most amenable for a normal quote unquote process for these stakeholders to go through? We're really looking for the types of limitation that should be considered, like size, scope, where these systems should be located. We want to know your folks' pain points, and we want to be able to kind of resolve these pain points before these become an issue and become a barrier to entry for I will say something different for intergovernmental wheeling. I encourage all the stakeholders to chime in, and Hawaiian Electric, you can chime in too. Again, KOC, you can chime in too.
Just to add some color to that, I mean, clearly pain points that we often experience on the private side, the IPP side, is the length of time that it takes to finish the IRS process, the challenge with effectively estimating and finalizing interconnection cost, being able to know that at the right time so that the long lead items can be ordered and delivered efficiently and you can stick to an actual construction schedule. I mean, these are the typical hardest things to do. As the commission has, kind of bluntly done a number of times, it is, kind of referring HECO to KIUC and its methodology for doing larger scale projects. It does it a completely different way, right? They normally go out and secure site control themselves as the utility, and then seek an RFP to interested parties to come and build a project that already has some specific technical parameters on the specific site that KIUC has already secured. So, thinking about that process and how much more efficient it's been and how much more successful KIUC has been in bringing online larger sized projects, I think we have an opportunity in the intergovernmental wheeling context to try to do some pre-planning and thinking ahead, where you've got, these entities that are not profit motivated, that are public interest motivated actually, and motivated to support grid operation and grid stability for the benefit of everybody. With some pre-planning, if we can build that into this process, we may be able to essentially identify sites that can be prioritized and streamlined in some way in terms of the way the utility approaches interconnection review, figuring out the cost in a more predictable way. I mean, that's really the big ask from the commission to HECO for this type of structure. Can we think about ways to achieve kind of partially what KIUC does in the context of intergovernmental wheeling? And a lot of that's going to require, obviously, more engagement from government agencies that have access to land and resources for building things. So we've got to inspire them to engage. But part of what can help inspire them is all of us trying to figure out how to make it a lot simpler to explain, a lot less risk, a lot less uncertainty, and a goal of actually getting a certain amount of power online before 2030.
Few, out of the box wish list items for interconnection. I think part of the challenge with interconnection, particularly in the RFP process, is we do group studies, right? All the projects come together. We're studying them all together. You have one project that may have an issue. Everything waits for that project. Not only that, but we're integrating inverter-based resources with grid forming technology. This is sort of kind of bleeding edge across the industry. So not a whole lot of expertise out there in the industry. And even like kind of the OEMs and developers are all kind of like learning with us together. I think like just thinking about ways to sort of speed that up, right? So one is getting rid of the variability. So like if we focused on one project, one large project, that would probably help a lot, because you're reducing the risk of like relying on 5 together. Another thing is having or using technology. Again, these are wish lists, not that it's totally legal or whatever, but having already like OEM and designs that have already been done and studied, and have that plop onto the sites. I mean, that would reduce a lot of the kind of modeling iteration risk. I think those things are sort of, that's the challenges that we just have, like I don't think there's a deniability that we have to study the system, and we want to study it to the most accurate way possible. Given we are this high inverter based system that is like moving really quickly, we don't have much margin in terms of like the stability of the system because these things can like move so quickly. We need to make sure they're tuned correctly and properly, and the way to do that, the only way to do that is through simulation currently. Yeah.
I mean, just following up on that, if you can't, I mean, based on the grid's characteristics and so forth, can you isolate different parts of the island to say like you can geographically, let's just talk about Oahu initially, since that's the most land constrained. Like you could say like you could have 5 projects at once being considered, but as long as they're in these 5 areas that are not overlapping in terms of the operation of the grid, is that hypothetically possible as a way to avoid group studies? You can just individually study each of those things, but do it at the same time.
That helps address that can be potentially done. So when we do the studies, there's the steady state part and then the dynamics. The steady state part potentially could be done in that way, like chunk it out and look at kind of the thermal constraints in the area. The hard part is the stability part, which is where all these grid forming things are really important. And that is that as all systems contribute to the system, based on contingencies that can occur, at remote distances from these other areas, contingencies that occur have kind of widespread impact on voltage, frequency, et cetera. And you need other resources to kick in and make sure that those things are modeled correctly so that they're kicking in at the kind of right response, not overly responsive and not under responsive. Yeah.
Could you couple from a development perspective? Could you couple grid improvements that help facilitate or reduce these problems at the same time that these new projects are coming online? So whether it's standalone storage near substations or other upgrades to the grid that HECO could apply to the commission for approval for the purpose of making the grid more receptive to these larger scale projects, like to do that at the same time, where these would be HECO owned, HECO built assets hypothetically, but they're done for the specific purpose of trying to make the grid more receptive and capable of receiving these other sources of energy. And the other thing to do would be, could you also consider allowing substantial overbuild of storage on site at some of these locations, government land locations that are allowed to receive energy from other sources in the area, again, to facilitate the integration of the new resources into the grid, make it easier. I mean, like would that kind of thing help? Like we haven't really tried that specifically.
I mean, yeah, so cost aside, yes, I think that would totally help. Like, I mean, if we could build basically more KESs that would provide more margin for stability on the system, that would allow more stuff. Maybe I don't know if I should say that, but yeah, it could potentially allow more, basically enable more. Yeah, if we did that. I mean, cost aside.
Sure. Yeah. Well, some of it could be also serving some other purpose, right? Like a resilience hub purpose, there's certain parts of Oahu that are much more vulnerable to extended outage than others because they're farther away from the centralized generation resources, whatever. I mean, just getting to that kind of approach of like whole. I know that this is part of the integrated grid planning process, but it's just, as you say, it's a dynamic problem. It's constantly changing. Technology is enabling us to consider other ways of doing things. Like we're open. I'm trying to communicate that we're open to problem solving. We're open to new ideas that help us do all these things faster than we normally do.
Thanks.
So I guess kind of follow on to Commissioner Yo's question. He kind of proposed, hey, where can we like help build out the capacity? But there's the one more step forward where you were talking about grid forming inverters and building out stability. So what about the next step forward? Like I said, would be what if you were to own those grid forming inverters and deploy them and make it like a turnkey solution, where you deploy them in the REZs in particular areas, so that these organizations could just maybe not plop in. Maybe that's not a great term, but just put their system in a turnkey area and not have to worry about all of the issues or all of the things they would normally have to worry if they were to be a normal IPP under a PPA. So kind of like bypassing that whole step, because I know that for the less sophisticated producers, they may not have the technical expertise to fully form the solution all the way to a node, or they might need additional help in determining what else they need to do. Just putting out there.
And also, I liked what you said, Ken, about the giving guidance as to types of technologies that would be more helpful. That's particularly salient in this context, where, again, like it's not a private profit-driven entity that you're working with. It's a different type of entity. So there's no reason why some suggestions could be made up front, like, hey, look at these sorts of things. This is actually what we need in this area. That would be easier for us to deal with, et cetera. Setting out the framework as specifically as possible. There isn't any reason why the government wouldn't be inclined to follow that. All right. Do we have any others? Anybody online want to weigh in here and just on any of these issues? It's kind of open discussion time. So.
Hey, this is Rocky Mold from HSEA. Can you guys hear me?
Go ahead, Rocky.
Hi. I was wondering, I heard HECO say that they wanted to do projects only on sites that have no load. What about sites that have very low loads and have extra space they can utilize for providing additional energy and services to the grid?
I think I can actually kind of cut this one off. We are going to address this issue, Rocky, in the commission's next order, and I think it's something that we can continue talking about. But maybe I can just ask the question now. Like, as long as the system is distinct electrically from whatever other system might exist on site to deal with some small amount of load or what have you, like isn't that the essential concern of HECO, is just making it really easy to track and potentially control, if it's a larger system, the power that comes from that intergovernmental wheeling resource? As long as it's completely distinct, would that be adequate?
I can speak from the sort of the compensation tracking side. That certainly would be adequate.
I think also from the interconnection part too, Rocky, like does that address your concern if it's not some sort of prohibition, blanket prohibition against someone having more than one load that's served on the site. It's just a question of design, really, and of setting it up in such a way that there's no risk of blending or confusion as to the exporting of power.
Yeah, that answers my question. And I understand that it's a point, thank you. Sounds like more conversation is needed on this one. But yeah, I think if there's a way to design something that would meet those needs, I think it would be helpful to have those types of projects eligible.
All right, thank you. That's a good point. Any other comments or issues from Brendan? You want to? Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
just real quick. Is this on? Can you hear me? There you go. Thanks. No, I just wanted to mention, when we talk about pain points, and I noticed the commission had it on this slide, the potential use of model contracts, form contracts. I know that, at Hawaiian Electric, we have always been a big proponent of being able to use model contracts if possible. We know they work, in certain circumstances. FIT was, I think, successful to some extent based on the simplicity of the contract and being able to use that. So if there's an opportunity within the wheeling context to use a model contract, I think we can save weeks, if not months, in the process, having to avoid the complex negotiations that usually go along with that. So I appreciate that. Yeah, that's something we did like CBRE, right? Is we actually had a Stanford contract and we have like a model PPA, right? Before you get to bigger one, right? So it's already like set, like a lot expedites the process. Yeah, that's definitely something to consider.
All right, I think, go ahead, Andrew, we can go to next steps in closing.
No, shall I do? Yeah. So I know earlier it was mentioned about having another meeting, like a stakeholder meeting, and I just wanted to take a poll if everybody's interested, because I know you're talking about presenting something to us too as well, right? About the wheeling model or whatever your proposal would be, right? Is that something you guys are? You mentioned that, right? Yeah.
Thank you. We were
Yeah.
We were assuming that we had this schedule.
yeah.
So we were
Yeah, but I thought
we're trying to say, okay,
Yeah.
well, let's put together basically a framework or straw
Yeah.
proposal that we could discuss at
Right.
the next opportunity if this is still the schedule.
Yeah. No, we can definitely use that
Yeah.
opportunity, and then I guess we might need, if necessary, to add another meeting later if we want to. We still have those other topics to discuss as well, right? Because I'm assuming we would dedicate that mainly for that, that one. Go ahead.
So to jump in, it's just to make sure we keep with the procedural schedule and listening to everybody's concerns. One of two things, because I definitely want to keep what we have in our proposed work plan, what our focus is, just a heads up, I know that we're going to ask developers, and Rocky's already contacted me. We're going to ask developers to come in to kind of give a pseudo presentation specifically designed for some of these governmental entities who might be interested. So I know he's going to present at June, and we have a lot of other things at June. So I guess, making sure we can fit everybody in, because I would love a straw man. I think that would help everybody at the table to know what you're thinking and to get real numbers. I know Colin's concerned about real numbers behind things. So we could either add in a July stakeholder meeting, or we can extend that 1:30 meeting and make it longer. So we typically end at 3 to 3:30. We could make it an hour longer. So I guess what we're trying to say is, what would we like to do? Would we like to add in another meeting, or would we like to just extend that meeting, because we still want to cover the topics in the focus areas that we said we were going to cover?
Well, I guess let me speak for myself, since I get to carry some water over here at Hawaiian Electric. But I think if we're still having this meeting, and as you described with the participation audience that Rocky anticipates to have, I think it would make sense to have this and have our straw proposal discussed soon after that in early July or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So anticipate some sort of docket entry about a July in between those two meetings.
Okay. So we'll just like you see on the screen, right? So we have a July 24th meeting and an August 26th, and we'll try to squeeze maybe another meeting in July, and we'll make sure you guys are notified about that one for your proposal. in addition to that. Also, just to let you know, as an update, we are working on an order for phase 2 that should be coming out soon, which will include the procedure schedule and also an opportunity for interveners, right, to a period of time, for 20 days. So that's going to be coming out soon, just to let you know. Sorry, I thought you had a question.
Oh, I had a question, but
Yeah, go ahead.
So it sounds like the PUC has some of its own thoughts of what a program could possibly look like. So is there anything that you could share or preview for HECO to make sure that
Not
what
yet.
they're proposing is
Not
in the
yet.
same ballpark? Or?
No, we're working on it.
Okay.
In parallel tracks, essentially, with HECO, but
Okay.
we want to try to get different straw people standing up, and we can throw darts at them and try to figure out what actually makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's what the goal is. We try to not just to build a model, but see if it's feasible or not, right? That's kind of the end goal by November. And if that is, then how would we proceed from there? Yeah. I think that's all we have, right? Oh, did you want to have any closing remarks?
No, not really.
Okay.
Thanks for the discussion, the open discussion, and willingness to just talk, about all kinds of different potential ways of approaching this. I appreciate that. Anybody else have any other final questions or comments today?
I just wanted to thank the commission for continuing to prioritize this and stick to the themes of simplicity and trying to get something off of the ground quickly. You mentioned how sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze, and I think the CBRE program in previous iterations was a good example of that. Many, many years were spent churning on a program that isn't very widely utilized. And so we can just get something going in the short term and provide for adjustments throughout the way. At least we know that it's serving the government's purpose, it's serving taxpayer dollars and ratepayers. And so it's all in the public interest, so we may as well just get something going. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And to reiterate what we said before regarding the inclinations, the fundamental purpose is to try to figure out how to get to results, and understanding that our path to those results may not always be what we expect initially, but the important part is actually achieving these results, and which we think will help with resilience, with reliability, with affordability, and everything else. And we're willing to think in new ways and work with the utility in new ways to make things happen. So thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.